salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to 3 Ps in a Pod, episode 206.
We made it.
Yes, we did. And Happy New Year for us as a filming. We've had some episodes in the new year.
It is
but
correct.
this is the first time that we filmed.
We were not in the new year.
That's right. So we are physically in 2024.
We are.
We are.
How y'all feeling?
I feel good.
We made it.
We did make it.
It always takes me a while to realize this, but I have a pretty bad headache, and I didn't realize until
Right now.
till we started filming. I said, "Oh, that's what that feeling is." Yeah. So
Do you need to go get some aspirin?
No, I'm okay. I'll be all right.
I will
But-
let you go.
No, that's okay. I'll be all right.
The audience
You
is
just asked
understanding.
how I was, and
I'm happy you
I
told
said,
me.
it might be a caffeine headache because I realized what I drank this morning. We have a lot
Well,
of.
I want to say Ed provided us with Diet Grapico.
Oh, well, you know, I hadn't seen Grapico.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
know.
so excited I can't
most
handle
of the
it.
people in our office like the no sugar versions of drinks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm particularly thinking of somebody on our staff's not from the South.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know what you call Missouri. I'm going to say they're not from the South.
No,
not our South.
Yeah. And so I thought, he's never heard of Grapico. And I was right.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I thought, I'm buying the Grapico.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a southeastern thing.
Yes, it is.
Mm.
I haven't
regardless
had
of
it in probably a decade or
Oh,
two.
me either.
It's
I
been a
hadn't
long
seen
time.
it.
So thanks for providing that, Ed. But I will say it is caffeine free, so there's your caffeine headache.
That's what I was gonna say, and I think there's something else in
Root beer.
I had root beer
Because
this morning. It's caffeine-free.
this person also told me they love root beer, so I got root beer.
You will complete my happiness if you bring in cheer wine.
It's a little harder to get hold of.
I know. I haven't had cheer
Lord.
wine in forever. Most of the audience is going, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
But that was a great drink when I was a kid.
Mhm.
So here we are. We're all sitting
Last
on our
week we
caffeine-free
had
drinks.
Baja Blast.
which was great.
Yes.
I did like the Baja.
They're finally
Zero
putting it in
sugar,
Yeah. Okay. All
zero
right.
sugar Baja Blast.
This is what people tune in for.
Oh, absolutely.
The truth be told, I don't know why you guys are
We
tuning in.
Mm,
We can direct you to better podcasts if you'd like.
always. We have a personal question for us three
Personal.
today. It's going to require us revealing some things.
Oh dear Lord. What does that mean?
I'm pretty open about things, but I don't know what they're going to ask.
All right. Well, it's a personal question. It's and I have a name. Actually, not
Thank you for
anonymous.
sending us a name.
This is from Clint.
Hello,
Hey
Clint.
How you
Clint.
doing, Clint?
I know several Clints.
I was
I
gonna say
do.
I know
I'm
a
going
few
to say hi to
Clints.
all of them.
Oh,
Just all the Clints. And
Whichever
those that
one.
we don't know. We'll also hi to you.
absolutely. So Clint wants to know, have you ever personally experienced a true miracle? And how do you know miracles are real?
Mhm.
I do realize it requires faith. And then he adds this. We've always been drawn to and love Community Christian Church, answering questions that others don't, as you addressed in your 200th episode. Well, thanks, Clint.
Thanks.
We try to answer the questions
That
that
we
you
are-
send us.
Now we are given that we can tell are serious. There's some we go,
Mm.
that was not a serious
Well,
question.
there's some that wouldn't require an entire podcast
No,
episode. So,
that's right.
So
So let me answer those. No, yes, no, yes.
thank you. So, have you personally experienced a true miracle, and how do you know they're real?
I think the first question is how do you define true miracle?
Mhm.
Because I assume that they're not asking. I mean, we think, all life by its nature is a miracle. I was telling a group of people that I was talking to recently about. I love there's a musical on Netflix called Matilda the Musical, which is absolutely
Is it
wonderful.
from Matilda the book?
Really?
And it's a musical based on that. It won some Tonys on stage, but then they've done a musical. But the opening number is called Miracle, and it's about life being a miracle. But there's this whole section in it that honestly, it's very uplifting to me when I think about it, where he talks about that the chances of existence are infinitely small. Like but somehow the most common thing in life is life.
Yeah.
That it's every life is a miracle, but also the most common thing that ever happens is that somehow everyone's alive. That it just is happening. But it's not an accident we're alive.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But we tend to look at things like, well, somehow our planet is just the exact right amount of distance away from the sun that we don't freeze, we don't burn up, that all those different
The
things.
Goldilocks zone.
Right, exactly. But all those things we look at, we go, well, of course, that's just the way it is.
Mhm.
We think it's miraculous in the sense that God is the one intervening in those things. But I don't think that's what this person's asking. I think they mean miraculous in the Jesus walking on water miraculous, or feeding the 5,000 miraculous, or something that happens that is so supernaturally beyond us, interrupting our world, that something might actually need to happen. So anyway, I mean, is that what we think it is? A true miracle? Or what do we mean by true miracle?
So we're gonna have to stop. Sawyer wants something.
Oh,
Okay.
gosh. All right, so we're back. Ed had to step away for just 1 second.
Sawyer desperately needed me.
Yeah.
Really desperately.
Needed some help.
So
He did not desperately need me.
No, of course
he
not.
did not.
So when we cut, Nathan was asking us a question about miracles.
Or what the question asker meant by true miracle. Because, I mean, I don't know. I hate answering questions that feel a little nuanced. Have you ever experienced a true miracle? I consider all of those things true miracles. There are a lot of things I've experienced in my life, but I assume they are asking about something that is beyond that.
So when I was in seminary, Bible college, that thing,
Okay.
they have definitions that split this stuff up. Now, I'm not sure that, I mean, I knew what to answer on the test.
Yeah.
There's a difference between providence,
Correct.
which God's at work in providence.
Intervention.
There's, and I just lost the word for this. There's the God being at work and not in providence. Providence is more God making things happen, but they're sort of behind the scene kind of thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's just the common grace. That's what I was saying. There's the common grace of God that's at work. And then there are miracles. And miracles are God breaking into what is natural and doing something that when you look at it, it is above, it is outside of nature.
Correct.
So I don't know if that's what this person means by true miracle.
I bet that's what they mean.
That's the kind of thing that when there are things that God breaks into nature and makes them happen. So if you're asking, have I personally been on the scene when one of those has happened, the answer is no.
I would also say no.
Yes. Agreement.
If that's what you mean, that I've been at a place that in the moment there was a true breaking into nature take place.
Yeah. There are things that I can say I have seen and experienced that I couldn't really explain. And they seemed way past the realm of coincidence. But could I actually definitively 100% prove that
Right.
it wasn't just a coincidence?
Right.
No, but I don't know if you can.
Well, I don't think you can, because by the nature of the miracle itself, and if you look at things that, at least once again, believers would call miracles, the things recorded that Jesus did in the Gospels, not every time Jesus did a miracle did people look and go, oh, well, look at this miracle worker, he must be the Messiah. Not everyone believed. They doubted the miracles.
That's exactly right.
So here's a person we believe is a genuine miracle worker. You may not as the question asker, but I mean, we believe he's a genuine miracle worker. The miracles were not enough to make faith occur.
Well, John calls them signs. Not everybody calls them signs, but John certainly calls them signs. And by the nature of the sign, you can decide whether you want to follow the sign or not. To what it is pointing to something, it in of itself is not the thing you were looking for.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's why miracles are not common in their nature. I know a lot of people who hear about miracles, or you start to have faith and you start to think, oh, if my neighbor or my brother-in-law or my unbelieving spouse could see a miracle, then they'd believe. And so why doesn't God just let us do miracles and make all these things happen? Because then everyone would believe. Well, it's the same nature as any other amount of evidence you put in front of somebody. It's not really the evidence that converts somebody. It's not really the miracle that makes it happen. It is the work of the Holy Spirit and the person's willingness, their softness of heart to accept that. And so I think the end of the question was something about, I know it takes a level of faith or something like that.
It does.
I think that's true. Jesus would even say about his own teaching, his own ministry, that some people they just did not have ears to hear. They saw, but they didn't perceive. They heard, but they didn't understand. That they saw it, and it was their own hardness of heart. It was their own unwillingness to see it. I think that's why I wanted to make the distinction at the beginning of, and Ed used the term common grace. All of these things of life and existence and the goodness of God. The fact that I was saying to this group of people I was talking to about it, we had a meal and we'd had these roasted potatoes that were in olive oil and sauteed onions. They were like the most delicious thing. The fact that that tastes as good as it does is a gift of God, because it didn't have to taste good. There was a way for us to get sustenance and stay alive and things not just be enjoyable. But God made it enjoyable. God made Grape-A-Co delicious for Jason.
Thank you, sir.
It is delicious.
Mm-hmm.
But what I mean is there are eyes we have not to see it. And I start to take things that I consider ordinary. It's just ordinary. It's just the way things work. Of course it worked that way. And human beings figured out how to make it good. But even that ability is a gift of God. It is God at work in the world. And if I don't have eyes to see it, right, well, then it's not going to matter. Jesus tells the parable about the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man dies and he's, cast into outer darkness. And he says, hey, if I'll come back from the dead and tell them, my brothers, then they'll believe. And Jesus, talking really about his own death, says, well, look, they have all the evidence they need to know that there's a God. Mm-hmm. A person coming back from the dead ain't going to make it happen for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I will add to that, to address the question, I can point you to evidences of people who've been healed.
Yes.
There are people that have been prayed for and that I know personally that they got better, and nobody knows exactly how or why. I think about and I'm getting to your question eventually, Nathan. I know there is a recording on YouTube somewhere of a guy who had lost the ability to speak with a clear voice. He was a very raspy voice. You guys know what I'm talking about. And it's a recording of him teaching a Bible lesson. And when he reads a certain passage, his voice comes back.
Mm-hmm. After many years
many years of not being able to speak. And you can hear that happen on the tape. So people will say, okay, there's a miracle right there on tape. Then there are other people who will listen to the exact same tape,
right,
and then question that the person was faking, or that this has been altered in some way, or
even that it's the way it just medically happened over time.
That's right.
His body healed itself.
My point in saying all of that is people can experience the exact same thing and define it however they have the faith to define it. For me these days, when I pray for people, I already know that God has made our human bodies in such a way that they have the ability to heal themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a miracle?
Mm.
Most people would say no. But if you believe that there's a God behind it all, that is a supernatural acting into the world that actually, so I could call that a miracle too. So my point in saying all that is just that has a lot to do with, like Nathan was saying, of the faith you bring to it, the perspective you have, the ears you have to hear it, to understand it, and to define it that way. So,
well, I also think that it's important that, I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying this is true about whoever at one of my many clients that asked this question, but I think people think that the recorded history that is the Bible records miracles on every page. And the truth is, if you break down the timeline of the Bible, there are distinct periods and not really even periods, I could say. There's periods of distinct people's lives where miracles take place. And for the rest of the thousands of years that are covered in that, most people in that time also. So Moses did miracles. We don't have any miracles that Noah or any of the other patriarchs that you know of that they performed. Moses had some miracles. Elijah, Elisha, they have some miracles. But between Moses and those guys,
not many.
There's a long period of time where nobody, I mean, I'd have to look at the timeline to be careful I'm saying it right, but let's just say hundreds of years to be safe. Then between those guys and the end of time where there's a person that says God's going to do something and happen, there's some acts of God like the finger writing on the wall in Daniel, and, those kind of things that God does some things that are prophetic kind of things. Then Jesus steps on the scene. That we know. John the Baptist doesn't do a miracle.
Not that we know of.
No.
It's not recorded.
And then Jesus gives the disciples, the apostles, some abilities to do some miracles. But then you get to the end of their life, like Paul doesn't heal himself, and he doesn't ask Timothy to come heal him. He asked him to pray for him.
Yes. That's right. And then we have the church, what we call the church fathers, who had personal relationships with the disciples who had healing ability. They don't claim that.
They don't claim it.
So something happened in a period of time that is unique to what happened after.
And then and I know we've talked about this on the podcast before. I have friends who that I trust who are in situations where there is no written word of God, much like what the apostles have, that tell me they have seen miracles like were in the Bible. And I have no reason to tell. Why would they lie to me about that? I hear miraculous stories from people that are taking place in the Muslim world. And I have no reason to doubt that that's true. But I think particularly for people in our modern culture, I think people think miracles have always been the proof of God's action in the world. But for the majority, even the text that God gives us to reveal himself, he isn't revealing that miracles are the normal scope of the thousands of years of history covered in the Bible.
Correct.
And so we should expect that to be the case as well.
Well, and it seems to be even in the thing you're talking about. What's unique about the Jesus and the apostles is that there were so many frequent happening in one. I mean, it was almost like a pandemic of miracles. There's so many happening in such a short span of time, as opposed to the rest of the Bible where it's very spread out. And it really does seem to be the evidence, even especially in Acts 2, when Peter talks about them speaking in languages, which is a miraculous thing that happens, right? He says, this is the evidence, right, that Jesus has risen from the dead, that the new covenant has come, the last days are here. All of that seemed to be a certain, confined really to this group of people to be evidence, signs about Jesus, not even for the specific things that were happening. And so I take all that to mean we're starting this series as we're recording this right now about this idea of interactive life with God. And Jesus makes clear, especially when he talks to, I think it's John, somewhere in John maybe 9 or so. No, John 9 is the person being healed, the blind guy. Anyway, when he talks about the bread of life, maybe it's John 6. When he talks about the bread of life, I'm the bread of life, that's right after he'd fed them all, and all these people come to him, and he goes, you're just here for more bread. Well, I'm the bread of life. The point that he's making there is the miracle wasn't the point. The point was that you would come to life with me. And that, going back to the point Jason and I were making at the beginning, the miracle increases the faith of people who already have faith because they go, God is alive. God is active. And I want more of God's power and presence. But it doesn't mean that it will always look like feeding the 5,000. It doesn't mean that it'll always look like this. But there is power and presence of living in life with God.
Well, and that was a part of the point I wanted to make about the hundreds of years of history in between as well, is that just because they're not these miracle working people that show up on the pages, God's active through all the pages.
That's right.
And he's answering prayer. There are providential circumstances that are brought about. There's God's common grace that's going on all the people of the world. And I'll just say my experience has been that I see more action of God in my life as I'm open to the fact that God is active in my life.
That's right.
And which may be the faith the person's talking about, as I have begun to pray, believing that God is at work. I see God at work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the goal. So that's why I would say to people, when I talk to people about miracles, is if you get to a place, if you want ears to hear, if you want eyes to see, to begin to see, start attributing every good thing in your life to God and being honest about it. Thank God for small things, and you start to see his activity in those things. I think sometimes we're afraid of looking foolish among people who don't believe, that we're afraid that somehow that is a sign that we have, they just think everything's God. Well, I do think every good thing is God. And maybe that's foolish. I get that. But, that's the nature of following Jesus, is what is considered foolish in this age is the wisdom of God. And there is a wisdom to saying, I want to live in a world where God is active and working. And I can do that if I just choose to see, when I prayed for that thing, that thing happened. And maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it was going to happen anyway. But who knows? Because I prayed, then it happened. Maybe God was active in that whole thing. Maybe God knew I was going to pray for it, and God was already at work before. Maybe God didn't know I was going to pray for it, and he was at work anyway. Either way, I'm living in a world where God's there.
But I do know that there's one way of interpreting that basically either diminishes your faith or keeps it stagnant.
Correct.
And another way of looking at it that grows your faith.
That's right.
That's right.
I think over here is a better.
It depends on if you're looking for some way to find proof for something you don't yet trust. Mm-hmm. There's always equal amount of reason to doubt.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. There always will be.
In my opinion, in the initial stages of trying to figure out doubt or trust, it's almost an equal battle in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. I will say this as we wrap this up. And Clint, you may not care about this, but I thought about it as I was thinking about the question that might be helpful to you. There are lots of resources that you can get out there that talk about the idea of miracles. If you want something really, really deep and scholarly, look up Craig Keener's book on miracles. Mm-hmm. It is like the definitive work on miracles. If you want a more easy to read version, Lee Strobel has one called The Case for Miracles. And both of those volumes document actual miracles, things that cannot be explained. There are eyewitness testimonies. There's documentation of that. If that's something you're interested in, check those out. It might be helpful to you.
That's good.
That's good.
All right. So we have a question coming up for next week. I always like to tease our next question. Y'all have heard the phrase, you reap what you sow?
I have.
It's in the Bible.
Apparently, we have talked about it on this podcast recently, and there's someone who wants us to clarify what we're talking about.
We'll be happy to do so.
So we're going to clarify it. Or not.
No.
We're going to try.
We'll bring more questions.
So come back next week. We will talk about that in more depth. It's a long question. Be here for it. See ya.
Bye.